Our first stop in New Zealand was Auckland, which is the largest populated city in the country, 1.5 million people. That is 32% of New Zealand's 4.5 million population. Auckland is the major financial center of the country. As a first-time tourist, the Sky Tower is the first apparent building in the city. Standing 1,075 feet high, it is a view tower with a 360-degree view of the city, and you can see almost 50 miles in each direction. You can spot volcanoes and other historical locations from here. A pink road runs through the middle of town. It is a dedicated bicyclist roadway. The Harbor Bridge is also easily seen from here. Another amazing thing about the Sky Tower, you can bungee jump in the middle of Auckland. Sue didn't exactly relish the idea of free-falling 1,000 feet down. A casino and many restaurants are also part of Sky Tower. Countless boats and yachts vouch for the wealth that Auckland attracts. Along the street at the Queen's Wharf are many red-painted wrought iron fences and lamps which were built between 1913 and 1923. Their purpose was to enclose the wharf. The ferry terminal building is a hub which connects all points of Auckland. It was completed in 1912 and today houses restaurants and shops. The ferry operations have been moved to nearby buildings. From here, we took a short ferry ride to the nearby island of Devonport. Many people commute across to work each day. The ride is only 15 minutes long. Devonport is reminiscent of an English seaside resort with the Esplanade Hotel built in the 1890s being its centerpiece. 5,500 people make this island their home. Bookstores, antiques, gift shops, and restaurants make up most of the town. Tourism is New Zealand's largest export industry in terms of foreign exchange earnings. We arrived at the end of autumn and beginning of winter to avoid crowds. A sweater and a jacket were needed most of the trip. A half-hour ride northwest of Auckland is the Westbrook Winery. We took an afternoon tour here and then to the village of Piha. The beach here is black sand and has a strong surf and rugged scenery. Lion Rock is a famous landmark, and the area is a subtropical rainforest with many waterfalls. While we were in Auckland, the Bright Nights exhibition took place at the Viaduct Harbor. There were many light installations by the artist Angus Muir. The theme was clean seas and sustainability. To us, the Viaduct Harbor area seemed to be the heart of the city, at least by the waterfront. The show of lights were very impressive. Sue enjoyed the nighttime activity. Our overall impression of Auckland was a pleasant one, and the food was excellent. But it was still a big city, and not the New Zealand we knew was waiting on us out in the countryside. Leaving Auckland after 3 days, we headed towards the town of Hobbiton. Hobbiton is the set location where the movie The Hobbit film series and the Lord of the Rings film trilogy was made.
Because what we're going to do today, we're going to walk in a big loop all the way around. We're going to come back through the garden later, like these people now.
In 1998, New Zealand film director Peter Jackson took a helicopter and was looking for a suitable spot for the movie. When he spotted this piece of land, he said it looked like a slice of ancient England. It was owned by the Alexander family, and after negotiations, the film set was under construction. Guided tours began in 2002. Most Hobbit house doors do not open. Almost all interior shots were made in another town. In one movie, a perfect oak tree was needed, so the crew found one, cut it down, reassembled it, and then ordered tens of thousands of hand-painted leaves from Taiwan. Who are you? Look at this beautiful ridge. Was this?
Welcome to the Green Dragon.
The Green Dragon Cafe is a replica of the Green Dragon that was featured in the Hobbit trilogies. Even if someone has not seen the movies, this landscape is worth the visit, simply magical in its own right. Within an hour drive of Hobbiton is a glowworm cave. These caves have stalactites and stalagmites and glowworms. Inside, the glowworms hang from the ceiling and emit a bright light, much like fireflies. If you love nature, then this is worth the trip. Otherwise, it may not be real exciting. Near the Watomo worm caves, there were very few accommodations due to the off-season, so we drove 2 hours to New Plymouth. In 2008, New Plymouth was judged the best place in New Zealand to live, love, work, and raise a family. Leaving New Plymouth, it was time to head 5 hours southeast to the capital city of Wellington. Okay, so where are we?
We're in Wellington, New Zealand. Come on, welcome to my world.
After driving in the left lane for days, you would think we would know which side of the sidewalk to walk on.
We're supposed to be over there on the left.
Wellington is much smaller than Auckland, but it is the country's capital as well as being called the country's cultural capital. It is home to the National Archives, the National Library, and the Museum of New Zealand, and it holds a worldwide designation for being the windiest city on Earth. Great restaurants and coffee houses line the streets on the waterfront. Food in New Zealand hardly ever rates less than an A, and the Crab Shack was no exception. Wellington is a chief seaport and serves both domestic and international shipping. City population is about 200,000 and about 400,000 total in the surrounding area. The city is small, and 18,000 of the city's residents walk or jog to work. The Te Papa Museum houses art, culture, and science of the country. It also holds an incredible history of the Maori, the original people of New Zealand. 5 stories of public floor space, and it sits on top of 150 shock absorbers to protect it from earthquakes. This museum was voted one of the top 500 places to visit in the world by Lonely Planet. In close proximity to the Te Papa is the Circa Theater. Started in 1976, it has gained a reputation as one of New Zealand's liveliest and innovative theaters. We attended Still Life with Chickens, an intimate, heartwarming story and funny play about friendship, loss, and life. City Gallery Wellington is another cultural presence. It showcases contemporary art from New Zealand and around the world. Wellington proved to be an enjoyable 2 days. From Wellington, we headed to the South Island, to Queenstown. A ferry and driving would take 15 hours, so we opted to fly. In the 1860s, the Queenstown area was a gold rush town, but people don't come today for gold, but rather thrill seeking. Winter skiing, whitewater rafting, bungee jumping, and relaxing in the 80 vineyards close by. The skyline gives a beautiful and quick overview of the entire region. Around 1 million people visit Queenstown each year, but only 10,000 people are permanent residents. Lake Wakatipu is the country's longest lake. A 1912 steamship, the TSS Earnslaw, still operates on the lake. It is the last remaining coal-fired passenger steamer in the southern hemisphere. It was originally built to transport sheep in the lake region. Piano music and a beverage station keeps the crowd entertained. I did a little dancing while Sue was downstairs dealing cards in the saloon. The halfway point is a stop at Walter Peak High Country Farm, a working sheep and cow property. You can either get off here or stay on the boat for the return trip. Downstairs is a history museum about the Earnslaw. On a cold day, this seemed to be the warmest spot on the entire boat. The total ride is 1.5 hours.
Tell us what Yorkshire pudding is.
What is a Yorkshire pudding? So Yorkshire pudding is like a thick pancake. So basically it's made the same ingredients as a pancake, but it's a thick batter. You traditionally have it with a Sunday roast in England. So instead of doing that, we've turned it into a wrap and put the Sunday dinner inside the Yorkshire pudding. So
And
that's
what do you put inside?
So we've got the slow cooked beef, we've got slow cooked pork, and then we've got sage and onion stuffing and carrots and potatoes with a thick onion gravy all over it. This is primarily British. Anyone from Britain will know what Yorkshire pudding is.
About a 20-minute ride from Queenstown is Arrowtown, first occupied in 1862 when gold was discovered. The gold lasted only a few years, but many of the buildings are from that time period. It was in Arrowtown that we learned about possum fur. Possums are a pest in New Zealand, so they are harvested for their fur. Extremely warm and soft, they make sweaters and jackets and blankets from them. Possum is warmer and softer than wool and will not freeze. It is mixed with merino sheep's wool and makes for a lifetime fabric. Wanaka is another small resort town that developed in the 1800s. A beautiful spot for skiing, hiking, and golfing. It has been used for a backdrop for several movies. Wanaka is about an hour's drive from Queenstown. For Sue and me, Queenstown is what we thought of as New Zealand before we visited. Mountainous beauty, lakes, rivers. It is a quaint but modern town and very few people during the off-season. We can't say enough good about Queenstown. Just excellent. Getting to Milford Sound from Queenstown is a little out of the way because of the lake, but a 4-hour drive will get you there. As we made our way, the weather turned colder. Snow started lightly falling. Sue thought she was in the sound of music. The sheep had to dig for their food in the snow-covered fields. There is a tunnel you must pass through to get to Milford Sound. If the weather is bad, the tunnel is closed and you can't get in or out of Milford. One hour after we passed through, the tunnel was closed for 2 days, but thankfully we were staying for 3 days. Choosing a place to stay at Milford Sound is easy. There is only one choice: the Milford Sound Lodge. About 24 chalets line the river and are surrounded by 4,000-foot mountains and a beautiful river. The lodge is only 3 minutes from Milford Sound Bay. Rainforests are not typically associated with snow, but it happens here at Milford Sound. There are countless places to walk here, and one of them is the chasm. A trail leads to a place on the river where the water drops off into a deep hole or chasm. Milford Sound is actually a fjord, not a sound. It was carved out by the erosion of an ancient glacier. There are daily boat tours of the fjord if the weather permits. Sue Colter and myself, we've been traveling 30 years, and for just one standing place, this is the most impressive of all.
It's unbelievable.
Over 500,000 people take this tour each year.
I'll start with the fjord. Milford Sound is a true fjord. We are a glacial carved valley.
There is a tour guide on each boat, and they give the history and names of the waterfalls and mountains and point out sea life. We caught a glimpse of bottlenose dolphins. Each tour includes a close-up experience with a skyscraper-high waterfall. If you forget your raincoat, you get a free shower. Fur seals are commonly seen on the rock banks of the fjord.
What I got for you. Coming up. Whoa!
Shortly after arriving, Sue was approached by a bird wanting a bite to eat. We both thought it was a kiwi, but we were wrong. It was a flightless bird called a wika. It is not forbidden to feed them, but there is one bird that you're not supposed to feed, and that is the kea. They are not shy in the least and are actually very aggressive. I was unknowingly approached by one after feeding the wika.
Oh, there's a... Get away from here.
Keas are the only mountain parrots. Keas are controversial because they are becoming endangered, but they are also no friend of farmers because they can actually kill a sheep and do. Keas are very intelligent birds and can be quite entertaining at times. I saw one dragging a tennis shoe away from a chalet. Humans can also get a bird's eye view of Milford Sound by taking a plane or helicopter across the fjord. The airport is in walking distance of the tour boat departure site. For a high-impact, lifetime moment, Milford Sound will not disappoint. The East Coast would be our next stop, where we would explore the town of Dunedin. On our way, we saw tons of sheep, but also many farm-raised deer. New Zealand is the world's #1 exporter of farm-raised venison. 2,000 farmers with approximately 1 million deer. Along the 5.5-hour drive, we passed through many small towns. The west coast touches the Tasman Sea, and Dunedin sits on the east coast on the Pacific Ocean. The railway station, one of the town's most beautiful pieces of architecture. At the time of completion in 1904, it could handle up to 100 trains a day. Its architecture is eclectic Flemish Renaissance revival. The station has largely been replaced by other forms of transportation, but still operates a tourist train for the area. Restaurants and shops occupy the interior today. One of the main reasons we wanted to go to Dunedin was to see the blue penguins. A well-known penguin colony is located at Harrington Point above Dunedin. The entire road to Harrington Point was right along the water. It was very beautiful. At the top of Harrington Point is the Royal Albatross Center. This is where tour groups gather in hopes of seeing the very small blue penguins. It was cold, sleeting, and windy.
The land of Tidal Head. And Tidal Head is named after one of the Maori chiefs that
Our group numbered maybe a dozen, and we were off, down the hill, in freezing winds and sleet. The moonlight would break through the clouds sometimes to help our visuals. After about 15 minutes, we spotted one lonely blue penguin on the sand. He was kind of a lookout guy. Penguins only come out of the ocean at night. This is a survival instinct for them. Shortly afterwards, we saw a small group swimming in. They got together and as a team went up the rocks and into the green thick bushes on the side of the hill. They sleep until dawn and then head back into the ocean for feeding all day. Blue penguins are only about 10 to 15 inches tall and weigh from 1.5 to 3 pounds. We read about a great local seafood restaurant and headed a long way around the peninsula and finally arrived at Carey's Bay Historic Hotel, Restaurant, and Bar. Originally built in 1874 as a hotel, restaurant, and pub, today it still operates as a restaurant. Carey's is located by an active fishing port and specializes in locally caught fish like sole, brill, monkfish, blue cod, and little neck clams. We know for certain that this stop on this rainy night was a true New Zealand experience. Only local folks here, friendly folks and patrons this night. On our way to see the penguins, we passed by the only castle in New Zealand, Larnac Castle. Surrounded by beautiful gardens, this castle was built by an entrepreneur and politician, William Larnac, in 1874. He originally referred to the property simply as the camp, but a local newspaper coined the house a castle shortly after the family moved in. 43 rooms, a ballroom, a cow and horse farm. This was the premier property during its day. After Larnac's death in 1898, the family finally sold the house in 1906. For 60 years, the house passed through several owners and disrepair. Barry and Margaret Barker bought the home in 1967 and have restored the house for public tours. The Barkers also added the gardens. Up the coast to the town of Oamaru. A highly rated seaside eating establishment on the way was Fleur's. We were going to eat lunch there, but we found out it closes on Mondays and Tuesdays. So the wooden seagull said, "Next time." The more rocky boulders are large and spherical boulders sitting on the shoreline. Science says that they are created from mudstone that has turned to concrete. A Maori legend says that they fell off of a large sailing canoe that brought the original people here centuries ago. Some are as large as 10 feet in diameter. Some are still hidden in the hillside. When arriving in Oamaru, it looks like a typical small modern town, and it is. But here runs a vein of eccentric people in shops that is unlike anywhere else in New Zealand. Located in the Victorian precinct are hip, oddball, fun, quirky shops and restaurants. This is in part due to Oamaru being the world's steampunk capital. There is a steampunk museum in the old precinct with an amazing collection of steampunk creations. The term steampunk was created in the 1980s and is in part taking 1800 steam-powered machinery and creating a fictional, futuristic world that the people during that time might have imagined. An entire fashion industry has been designed around the imagery as well as music. The Criterion Hotel was the premier hotel built in 1877 and the first hotel with a bathtub. But by 1905, a no-alcohol law was passed and it became simply a boarding house until it was bought in the 1940s for a foundry and a local wool and skin buyer. A restaurant, pub, and hotel operate here now.
And you share.
The management were very nice and the food was great. In 1987, a local trust bought 16 of the original buildings in the district which were in disrepair. Today, these structures are New Zealand's most complete Victorian commercial building.
Hi, my name's Flora. Welcome to Whitestone Cheese Company, Oamaru, New Zealand.
Whitestone Cheese Factory is a great place to buy artisan cheeses. The factory gives tours several times a week. The Star and Garter is Oamaru's oldest restaurant. Built as a hotel in 1867, it became a tea room in 1902 and has operated as a catering business and restaurant ever since. A wall full of photos from the early 1900s show weddings and parties that have taken place over the past century. It would be considered a mom-and-pop family-style restaurant in the U.S. The owners were genuine and the food very good. Our next half-day drive would lead us to possibly our favorite place of the trip, a small town on the Banks Peninsula, Akaroa. On the way north, we passed through the port city of Timaru, a major cargo port of the South Island. Timaru is also the second largest fishing port in the country. We stopped at the Sacred Heart Basilica, completed in 1911. Akaroa means long harbor in the native Maori language. It is sheltered by the remnants of an ancient volcano. The English arrived in the early 1830s, and the French arrived in the early 1840s. The French bought land from the local Maori chiefs, but were unaware that the English did the same several years earlier. Both England and France stayed after some negotiations. Akaroa shows mostly French occupation today with the street signs and architecture. It is the oldest colonial town on the South Island. Historic cottages line the side streets, many from the mid-1800s. The village has a lot of unexpected gems. One was the Giant's house. Josie Martin is an artist with a most unusual canvas, her yard. Outside her home, she has, since 1993, been creating incredible mosaic sculptures. She started off as a painter, then began experimenting with these zany and whimsical and eccentric pieces of art. Her inspiration started when she was digging and unearthed these 1800s pieces of pottery. She made a front entrance to her house with the pieces and never stopped the process. All of her pieces are seriously fun and are a celebration of life.
Un espoir merveilleux, il en a le façon. C'est si bon, ces petites sensations, ça va mieux qu'un million. Tellement, tellement c'est bon. Lovers say it in France. When they thrilled to romance, they say that it's so good. Let me say it to you, darling, as the French people do.
In between the sculptures, you can see her love of horticulture and gardening. She is equally a master of that. Private collectors buy her works, and she has exhibitions around the world. Her home is also used as a bed and breakfast parts of the year. Excellent food is found all over New Zealand, and Akaroa gives the best in French cuisine. A few miles out of town is the Onuku Church, the only remaining Maori church on the Banks Peninsula. It was built in 1878 for the local inhabitants, but the Pikiha, the white settlers, were also welcome. Across the hills is O'Kane's Bay. Located there is the O'Kane's Bay Museum, a comprehensive history and artifact collection of the original people, the Maori. Murray Thacker is solely responsible for this amazing storehouse of history. Thacker's 8 great-grandparents were early settlers of this area, which gave him a deep connection to O'Kane's Bay. Born in the early 30s, he spent his childhood gathering Maori treasures from local beaches and sites of antiquity. He continued collecting into adulthood and finally needed a building big enough to hold the vast collection of historical objects. And this became the O'Kane's Bay Museum. He also filled a house with colonial artifacts. We met a couple who spent time with Thacker and knew him very well.
Now you are
I'm Arthur, or King Arthur they call me.
King Arthur?
Yes.
King Arthur III.
Okay. And I'm married to King Arthur III, so I have theatrically called myself Queen Lilybeth of Proper Life.
Okay. All right. Well, it's so nice to meet you.
Thank you.
And he was always gathering stuff. Anything that was old, he grabbed and put it here. And some of it's, well, I would say only about 1/3 of it has been indexed and categorised. There's about 2/3 of stuff out the back here.
He didn't show off his wealth. He was a humble character.
He was a gentleman, a Freemason, and a honest, hard-working man that suffered no fools.
Just a good man, just a good man.
He suffered no fools.
He passed away in 2017, but leaves and preserved a world of memories from a long ago culture. There is a general store next to the museum, which Thacker helped keep open through the years. We talked to Debbie, the storekeeper, about the small village.
This is Debbie, and we are in New Zealand, and she's going to tell us about this store.
Well, this is the oldest, longest running store in New Zealand, the O.G.B store. And this is Teddy the cat, who's been through 3 shopkeepers.
The history of this place, it started off as just a food and supply place, or?
Apparently it's been a hardware store, it's been like a petrol, it's had a lot of people through. Moved up with my 2 children. They go to the school next door, and there's 10 kids at the school.
10 children in the school?
Yes, and 2 teachers.
10 children?
Yes.
How many teachers?
There's 2.
2. O'Kane's beach is clean and beautiful. We had the beach to ourselves on this cold and rainy day. Sue loved collecting seashells, and she thought she was collecting shells called abalone.
Got dirt in it, sand in it.
Abalone shells have vibrant colors and are famous for use in jewelry making. But all the excitement washed away like sands on the beach when we were later told that she had only collected mussel shells. Oh well, at least she got to be excited for an hour.
The problem is with yellow-eyed penguins is that it is so far illegal to have them in any sort of a zoo situation.
Although we had seen blue penguins back in Dunedin, we found out about a local Pahatu penguin tour. It was different because the landowner's purpose was to help the blue penguin repopulate the region. Joey, a 5th-generation farmer to the Banks Peninsula, was our guide.
It's a whole different story trying to train sheep.
The sheep really took a liking to Sue, especially with food in her hands.
That one's a really big one.
When Joey's mom and dad moved to this area, there were countless penguins. But as the years rolled by, the population dwindled. It was mainly due to the introduction of the ferret and stoats, which are weasel-type animals. Traps were put out as part of a conservation program on their private property, which is funded in part by tours.
Well, what we are trapping here are rats, hedgehogs, and stoats. Now, stoat is like a ferret, just smaller. We actually don't have any ferrets left on this southeast corner of Banks Peninsula because we, the people, got rid of them. We did very well, and we did it without using poison as well.
The boxes serve as small home protection for the penguins. They come and go, sometimes every day. Joey told us that the boxes are only checked about every 40 days as not to disturb the animal.
The only reason we open a box now in all of this habitat is to tell us where the predators are. What's hitting this colony? Is it stoats? Is it ferrets? Is it weasels? Hedgehogs eat the eggs, rats. So we want to know because we want to catch them. So
How can you tell?
Oh, the evidence in the box.
Okay.
So bits and pieces of a penguin is a ferret and a cat. A whole penguin drained of blood is a stoat. Missing eggs and chicks, that's a rat or a stoat. Broken eggshell, that's a hedgehog. So all of this stuff we know over years. The differences in the beaks.
Oh my goodness. It's a male and a female?
I'm just looking, it has to be a male and female. So female's on the bottom there, male on the top. Right, so we'll have a look at these. These 2 look like they're, just hanging out. Oh, so.
Look how
Those are the dark blue, aren't they?
That's what would be called a product of interbreeding.
Okay.
We made our way down the hill where a pair of binoculars are used to spot penguins floating on the water. We did see a large group, but on this day they either slept on the water or came in long after dark. We did see a curious seal that didn't find us very appealing. This was a very educational tour. Thanks, Joey. Akaroa could be home for many weeks if we had the time. Our last stop on the trip would be Christ Church.
Welcome to Christchurch Tramway.
We're just finishing our shift for the day, so we've only got, this is the tramway over here, so we've got this part and this part.
We took the tram to take a quick look of the town center. The tram was enjoyable, but like the weather that day, there was a cloud of sadness over the city. In 2011, an earthquake hit Christchurch, and as we rode along, the tour guide talked about the damage. We saw parking lot after parking lot where buildings used to stand. Over 1,300 buildings have been either partially or totally demolished. In the residential area of town they call the Red Zone, over 7,000 homes have been razed to the ground. There are still many beautiful buildings intact, but everyday activity in Christchurch is different than before the quake. There's even a museum memorializing the loss. The heart and soul of the city was Christ Church Cathedral. It sits today in broken condition. In spite of all this, there's an optimism living in the city. One new and alive and energized place is located in the old government building, the O.G.B. restaurant and bar. Stylized by the 1920s, the restaurant and bar is the brainchild of Nick Inkster, who wanted to do something special for his city after the earthquake. Along with the unique and fun atmosphere, you are instantly surrounded by upbeat hospitality and conversation by the staff and Nick himself. The food comes and we realized it is the best meal of our month-long trip. New Brighton is a suburb of Christchurch, and the New Brighton Pier is a landmark for all the area. It was damaged in the earthquake and closed for repairs for a period, but reopened in 2018. It is made of concrete and is 980 feet long. There was a wooden pier at the same location from 1894 to 1965. The new pier was built in 1994 and is used for walking, fireworks, and various events. New Zealanders are called Kiwis because their national bird is the kiwi. But chances are you will not see a kiwi bird when you visit. They only come out at night, and only in the deep forest. We wanted to see a kiwi before we left and actually found one at the Willowbank Wildlife Reserve. The reserve was started and is privately owned by the Willis family in the 1970s. These children almost lost their shoes by these huge eels. As you start walking, the reserve is much bigger than it seems. We enjoyed everything we saw, but we were really there to say we saw a kiwi in New Zealand. After we passed the monkeys, it wasn't too far ahead. Finally, a kiwi sign. The areas of the kiwis is very dark because in the real world, they hide in the daytime and feed at night. We were told there were only 5 birds here, so we needed to be very quiet and listen out for leaves being walked on. In a few minutes, we heard the sounds of 2 kiwis. Then, just barely, we could see them walking in the dim light. They seemed like they were talking to each other. Back and forth they walked over the same small area. Although it wasn't the real forest, we could truly now say we have seen kiwis. Our trip was complete. New Zealand is a fantastic experience.